I am walking away from fire, and I am freezing to death. This is Southcoast Hack. We won. I watched the fort burn because we set it on fire, and inside it was every basket of grain, every sack of food, everything that could have kept us alive tonight. To understand why a colonial army burned its own survival, and what that decision cost on a 15-mile march through a Rhode Island blizzard, we need to go back to the morning. December 19th, 1675. Before we marched. Before the fort. Before the fire. I'm a private in the Plymouth Colony Militia. Rank and file. About 158 of us from Plymouth under Major William Bradford. Part of a combined force of roughly 1,000 colonial soldiers assembled at Smith's Castle near Wickford, Rhode Island. I want to be honest about something before I go further. The Narragansett had pledged neutrality in this war. They hadn't joined King Philip's coalition. The colonial governments believed they were sheltering Wampanoag warriors, or would eventually, and decided not to wait and find out. That decision, made far from any swamp, is part of what I am carrying into the dark tonight. We set out before sunrise. 15 miles through Rhode Island forest in December, with no halt for food. The plan is to reach the Narragansett winter fort deep in the great swamp, do the work, and return. Simple. The way plans always are before they meet the ground. The weeks before had been unusually cold, even for New England. The great swamp, impassable bog in warmer months, had frozen solid. That frozen ground is the only reason we could reach the fort at all. I remember the way it rang under my boots. Solid, clean, almost like the earth was doing us a favor. It was not a favor. It was a loan. And the terms were due tonight. We reached the fort just after noon. It was enormous. 4 to 5 acres of palisaded ground built on an island of dry land rising out of the swamp. Thousands of people sheltering inside. The records put the number somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000, most of them women and children wintering there. Hundreds of wigwams. And inside those wigwams, one officer would write afterward, was enough grain to supply the whole army through spring. I didn't know that yet. I was looking at the palisade wall and waiting for the order. The fight lasted hours. Men I had marched 15 miles next to were down before the afternoon was half gone. Major Bradford took a wound to the eye and kept fighting. The Army's total killed and wounded ran well over 200. The exact figure is contested, but that is where the scholarship lands. The Narragansett inside the fort suffered far worse. How many is genuinely unknown. The record runs from hundreds to over 1,000 dead, and no one was counting carefully in the middle of a burning fort. I am not going to pretend otherwise. What I can tell you is that when it was over, we held the ground. The wigwams were still standing, the food was still inside them, and the sun was getting low. That is when Captain Church started arguing. Benjamin Church was an aide to Governor Winslow, and he was the most experienced soldier in that army. His own memoir records what he said next. He begged them. He told Winslow the wigwams were, his exact words, lined with baskets and tubs of grain and other provisions sufficient to supply the whole army until spring, and that every wounded man might have a good warm house to lodge in, which otherwise would necessarily perish with the storm and cold. Winslow heard him and gave the order to burn everything. I was watching the wigwams catch when I understood what that meant. The grain went first. There is a smell when food burns. Something sweet underneath the smoke, and once you have smelled it, you do not forget it. He was right. I could see he was right, and we burned it anyway. Church was wounded. He would be evacuated by vessel and would not walk what came next. I would. Most of us would. The order came down the line. Form up. We are marching back tonight. 15 miles. Dark. Empty hands. Cotton Mather wrote that this march was through hardships than an whole age could not parallel. We formed the line by the light of the burning fort. That is the image I cannot shake. The only light we had for the first miles was the fire we had just set to the food that was killing us. We were walking by the light of the thing that was killing us. The storm that had been building all day came down hard once we were in the trees. No shelter, no provisions. The wounded men on litters had spent hours fighting in freezing temperatures, and now they were lying still on boards in a December blizzard, the cold that had been an asset all morning, collecting what it was owed. Men started to slow. Men started to stop. There is a specific kind of fear on a march like that. Not the fear of a fight, which has movement and noise and immediate action to absorb it. This is quieter. Watching someone ahead of you sit down and knowing what it means if they don't get back up. 22 wounded men died on that march. Men who might have lived, who would have lived, Church believed, if they had had the shelter he described. Mather writes the storm wrapped many a brave soldier in his winding sheet. And here is something we did not know while it was happening. Mather records that some Narragansett leaders debated coming after us, pursuing the column. Some argued for it. They chose not to, whether because their own losses were too severe or for reasons the record does not fully explain, I cannot say. But we were that broken. One decision by the enemy away from annihilation, and we had no idea. We were just walking. We staggered into Smith's Castle at 2 in the morning, December 20th, 19 or 20 hours since most of us had eaten. And there at the dock, by mercy, not by plan, not by any order anyone can point to in the record, was a vessel. Captain Andrew Belcher out of Boston, with a ship loaded with provisions for the army. Church's own words. It mercifully came to pass that Captain Andrew Belcher arrived at Mr. Smith's from Boston with a vessel laden with provisions for the army, who must otherwise have perished for want. Mercifully came to pass. Not according to plan, not as arranged, mercifully. That is the whole story of that night in 3 words. 40 men were buried in the northeast corner of the Smith's Castle property in the days that followed. The ones who died in the fighting, the ones who didn't survive the march, the ones who made it to the dock but couldn't hold past morning. That grave is still there. It has been there since December 1675. Now here's what I need you to understand about what we won. The Narragansett had pledged neutrality before December 19th. After it, they were in the war, fully, without reservation. Whatever calculation they had been making about whether to join King Philip's coalition, we answered it for them in the Great Swamp. Under Canon Chet, they assembled. By spring 1676, they had organized a counteroffensive that reached across southern New England. Providence was burned, including the house of Roger Williams, the man who had spent decades arguing for fair treatment of the Narragansett people. Smith's Castle itself, the post where I sat at 2 in the morning eating Belcher's provisions, was burned in retaliation. Canon Chet was captured and executed in April of that year. The Great Swamp Fight did not shorten King Philip's war. It guaranteed a worse one. The frozen ground made it possible to reach the fort. It was frozen when we marched in, and it was frozen when we carried our dead back across it. The same ground both times. That is what I remember.